John with Grupo Solidaridad, Father John with Grupo Solidaridad. Want to welcome you all. This is a little bit new. I am streaming from StreamYard and trying this out. And I have a YouTube page and my homilies page, and then just a regular Facebook page. I do not represent any other organization other than myself. I don't represent the Catholic Church. I don't represent my diocese. Don't represent Pact. This is just little old me being here with my weekly rant. So welcome. So here we go. We have three things here. Three amazing tools. I got the chancla or slipa, the wooden spoon, and the big chopstick. Actually, hold from the small. And never touch the end of it unless you're using them for disciplinary reasons. And why am I bringing it up? Well, when a mom is utterly and absolutely like at her wit's end about what do I do with this toddler, this 3-year-old that's running around the house, making the party, the luau, whatever it is, an absolute about that child and not about the people that are there. What do? You can talk to the child and bring it in, but I don't know. A lot of us didn't grow up with, let's talk this out. It's usually the chancla comes out, the slipa. We had the wooden spoon and the chopstick would come out. We have a man child in the White House right now, and this man child is running amok with the world. Now everybody in the world is really pissed off about the Greenland thing. So you're having people are just really, really pissed off. And they also know that it is with a tongue in cheek, as this guy's kind of nuts. They know he's nuts. So anyway, it's like a child having a tantrum. You don't take the child seriously, but you need to settle that child down. So you give the child things like, I don't know, a FIFA Peace Prize. That didn't settle the child down. You give the child someone else's Nobel Peace Prize. Play with this for a little bit. It's your sister's little toy. That doesn't settle the child down. At this point, you bring out the fucking chancla. So anyway, but we are not looking and advocating for any kind of those old-fashioned, old-school measures of calmness. What we're looking at as disobedience. What are we going to do? And civil disobedience, looking at nonviolence. We're going to be exploring that today. But we're going to be looking at it with what the role of a faith community might be in all of that. What is the role of faith community in all of that mess and all that meshugana? What are we going to do? What are we all about? And so it's trying to understand our role more completely. So at the end of today, I'm really hoping that we'll have an understanding of our role, what our role might be in this very, very difficult and challenging and dangerous time. So that's kind of what we're going to be doing that. So let's get into it. So first of all, I want to welcome folks that are in here. I am looking at on delay because it's the StreamYard thing. I'm looking at this on delay with my friend Elaine and Lisa watching. Hello. Other people are watching. Please do just let me know where you're viewing this from, when you're viewing it, and any kind of petitions or any kind of prayer requests. Put those in the comments. So we'll do that. So let's kind of get into this. First of all, we talk about what is our role as a faith community to engage more explicitly, more effectively, and more appropriately in this resistance, this kind of community rising up. And it is not always the real beautiful, giant things that we see, people nobly being martyred. That's not really, I don't think that may not necessarily be the appropriate role or the most effective role. But I think that the role that we have is, of course, public witness and organizing. We're going to talk about public witness today, but in the subsequent editions of this, we're going to be talking about organizing and why organizing is important, because organizing is what we do while things are messy at the top. We are busy building power at the bottom. Just to kind of give you a hint of where we'll talk about this, and I'll come back to this metaphor, is that the dinosaurs, when they were dying out, and they were all dying out at a certain point, right? The animals that were rising up are the small, tiny mammals. That's power being built from the bottom as an empire collapses on itself. The people who are excluded from the power structures of the empire really aren't touched by the empire. directly as much because they didn't have a lot of investment in it. But if they haven't built power, they'll be victims. They'll be underneath the rubble. What we're doing is when we look at organizing, true organizing, as we will get into this in subsequent editions of this, of the weekly gospel rant, we are going to be looking more specifically and more deeply into the question of how do we build power and organize while this maelstrom of craziness is happening around us, swirling around us. So let's kind of get into this. So no matter what road you may choose to engage in, whether it's in organizing or if it's in public witness and in these kinds of mass demonstrations that are going to be uprooting, because obviously the chancla, the wooden spoon, and the chopstick, the big chopstick, those are not working on this toddler. And giving toys to that toddler, little tiny shiny objects, that's not working on that toddler. What may be working is that people just simply collectively lift that toddler out and move that toddler out. And that's kind of what we have to kind of think about that. Give them a timeout because the grown-ups are in the room right now and we are not going to spend any more time with the screaming child. So, of course, everyone's going to say, you don't have a child. And then the answer is yes, exactly. But let's go ahead and kind of get into how we do this in a nonviolent way. And the nonviolent way is looking within ourselves and creating that space, that spiritual space, emotional space within ourselves to be nonviolent so that we can, whatever measures we need to take to intervening kind of work. It's not done in a way that would create more harm, property damage to ourselves, damage to others, and certainly even damage to our enemies. We create a powerful movement of removing the craziness. And that's what we're going to be doing today, talking about that, how that happens. And so we have to, again, enter into that space of stillness where we can examine our inmost thoughts, where we can prepare ourselves, because this is not an accidental work. This is an intentional work that we do together. And so let's kind of look at that. So let's take a breath in and release that breath. And just allow ourselves to just be present. The ubicación, the being awareness of where we are. So let's just take that moment of just breathing in and out at our own pace, our own way of going in and out, and we are conscious of our breath. We're conscious of what's around us. Our eyes are either closed or softly gazing, but we are paying attention to ourselves, what's going on within ourselves. So as we breathe in, we hold and we slowly release, and we continue to do that, just time and just trying to in and out. Let's do a box breathing, which is like bringing breath in for 4 counts, hold for a count, and with our nose, release that breath 6 counts. Let's do it again, 4 counts in, hold, out, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, hold, breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 4, hold, and release, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, hold, and just kind of keep that breathing in 4 counts, hold, releasing 6 counts, hold. So at the bottom and the top, we are simply conscious of who we are, where we are. And as we breathe in the in-between parts of when we have that breath and we release that breath, at the top of receiving breath, we invite the divine to transform that breath to love, healing, and forgiveness, and we release that breath outwards to ourselves on our breath outwards. Do that a couple more times at your own pace. Next, let's do that for our families of choice, our families of love and support, the families that accept us for our fullest, our authentic selves. Breathing in, hold, invite, and slowly release love, healing, and forgiveness to yourself, and then now to your family, the family of choice, the family of biology, whoever sees you and accepts you for who you are. Now, this next one is for people we don't know, people we see every day. So take a breath in, hold that breath, and slowly release that breath outwards to the people that you don't know, but you see every day, you're around them. You have communion with them because you are present in love, healing, and forgiveness. That is your presence to them. And this next one, hard, but it is essential. It is to our enemies. people we don't like, they disagree with us, vehemently disagree with us. How do we show up? Meeting that energy with love, healing, forgiveness breaks that cycle. And we release that breath of love, healing, forgiveness towards them. And so when we show up in spaces where there is tension and hate, we are not contributing to that hate and tension. We are bringing a higher self, generating a higher energy, a higher love. And then lastly, to the people, to our planet, we're breathing in, hold, invite the divine to transform, release through our bodies, our bellies, into our first basic energy level, down through our legs and our feet and down into the earth itself. We are releasing that love. We recognize who was here before us. In my case, it's the Ramaytush people of the Ohlone-speaking nations. It is the Aramai people that are here in Pacifica, in the southern part of Pacifica. Recognizing their contribution, their cultural wisdom passed down through to many generations, and with some of the practitioners of Ohlone Way. Some of the descendants are authorities on balance of ecology and life and economy. We recognize our planet itself. The planet is a living, breathing reality. We are connected to that planet. We're connected to the solar system, all the planets and all the heavenly bodies that are here, circling around M-class sun, circling with other planetary systems in the arm of the galaxy that we're part of, spiraling around and ultimately expanding with other families of galaxies, ever expanding outwards, that breath connecting us, the holy breath, the divine breath, breathing in and out, recognizing how we are connected to each other and to all the universe. All right. Well, we certainly want to welcome Elaine and Lisa and Poncho. We're going to keep our prayers for Renee Good and prayers for resistance against violence and oppression, as Poncho is reminding us. And then Bruce Morasca is also joining us. I want to welcome all of you for whatever religious tradition, or if you don't have a religious tradition, you're all welcome here. This is a space for all of us to be here. Ana Maria just joined us. Bienvenidos. And she's watching from San Ho. All right. So what we're witnessing now in federal immigration enforcement is showing a clear and disturbing trajectory. What was once framed as a removal of dangerous criminals has expanded to the broader targeting of all immigrants or people who are suspected of being immigrants or suspected of being undocumented just by looking at them. That would be the Kavanaugh hold, Kavanaugh's decision that if you look undocumented or you like working in a job that would be taken by undocumented folks, you are free to have your Fourth Amendment is suspended and you can be demanded to show papers. And so it's enough for intervention there. So that is a Kavanaugh hold. Then the mission shifted towards aggressive policing in the public square and street violence. And that is really kind of grabbing people off the street from restaurants with no warrants, just grabbing people, shooting them first, and then asking questions later, hanging them and asking questions later. Very much a wild, wild west attitude of just kind of grabbing people, very inhumane. And now, recently, within the past week and a half, this attention has turned away from immigrants and has turned towards American citizens, turned towards us in surveillance, which is, the budget, the big beautiful bill is going into surveillance. It's going into intimidation, repression of dissent. This is targeting people like myself, faith leaders, organizers, just regular people who refuse to remain silent, who are marching. And what we're recognizing right now is that allies, American folks, Chicanos, African-American folks, Asian Americans, all people who have been here for generations. My family's been here. Part of my family arrived in 1701. Other parts of the family arrived in the mid 1800s, others before World War One, before the Great War. All of my family has been here for quite a long time, but you start to see that our folks, people that are English speakers, people that are been naturalized or just been generationally American citizens, allies that stick up for the vulnerable. You are now also a target of this regime. Now, this escalation should surprise none of us who have been watching this for the past 10 years. It has been openly telegraphed by political architects of this, Stephen Miller, and repeated like an idiot parrot, Donald Trump. And the goal was never, we knew this. We knew it from the very beginning. I don't want to do the I told you so dance. I kind of want to do it, but I'm not going to do it. This goal has never been about immigration enforcement. It has always been about discipline and controlling the population and allowing those who are part of that small circle of sycophants around the regime, the leader, how they will continue to rise up and how they will continue to have a lot of power, maintain that power. Historical models show us that when a government shifts from targeting a marginalized group to targeting those who stand with them, it is revealing the moral emptiness of any kind of claim of patriotism, of security and safety. What begins at the margins doesn't stay there. It affects the entire system. And this is exactly where we, as people of faith, come into this place. So I know that we welcome people that may not belong to a faith community, but this is a place where people that are in a faith community, that are on the progressive side, are going to be able to kind of look at this and kind of rediscover the very ancient roots of resistance have been in faith communities, from the prophets of Israel to the early Christian church, to many strains of Buddhism, strains of Hinduism, all of this, and Jainism, and all of these. There's always been some form of resistance to the empire, whatever empire happens to be in power. There's always been this kind of resistance and this moral witness to that. And so people that subscribe to some kind of religious group or community, we recognize that we are shaped by the prayers that we say, by the rituals that we participate in. We're shaped by the reflections that we share based on those texts and our experiences of entering into ritual. We're shaped by stories of courage of saints and the martyrs. We're willing to name, because of this shaping, this what we call formation, spiritual formation, this opening up our religious imagination. It allows us, as folks that are in these prophetic dimensions of our religions, to name injustice, even when naming that injustice would carry a risk. So the struggle isn't about trying to win over the other side, because I know that politically people say, well, let's try to get everyone on the other side, let's talk to them and win them on the other side. That isn't actually what holy struggle is about. Holy struggle is fighting to do the right thing, regardless of what the other side says. So my energy isn't spent to try to convince white Christian nationalists that they're theologically, pastorally, and politically wrong. They are. I know that. I've spelled it out here. We've talked a lot about it ad nauseum. But my energy isn't spent to try to convince them to be on the side. My job is to organize and bring people into a movement of consciousness and movement, and bring those who are willing to listen and participate to move them forward. So the early prophetic traditions weren't about trying to convince people to do the right thing. We would convince the leader, King David. Nathan convinced King David that he was an idiot, that he was a terrible person, that he needs to change. Yes, we can do that. But the effort has been also about mobilizing people to do the right thing, to mobilize a community so that the community who holds the power is able to continue holding that power. So what our traditions and the prophetic traditions teach us that the divine is not present in the status quo of comfort and power, but rather the divine discloses the divine self in the struggle for human dignity, even when that costs us quite a bit. So at this moment, it is asking a lot of us. And on this Dr. King weekend, it is asking us, especially those of us that have a place and occupy some privilege by race, gender identity, sexual identity, religious preference, race, obviously, whatever that is, that privilege we enjoy. It is asking people of privilege to consider that you can't armchair this shit. You got to get involved. So this is from letters from the Birmingham jail, and it is appropriate that we read this. I'll read it from Dr. King. It's an excerpt. This is a very long letter. And he says, first, I must confess that over the last few years, I have been gravely disappointed by the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in the stride toward freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is in the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I can't agree with your methods of direct action. Who paternalistically feels he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by the myth of time and who constantly advises a Negro to wait until a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. In spite of my shattered dreams of the past, I came to Birmingham with the hope that the white religious leadership of this community would see the injustice of our cause and, with deep moral concern, serve as a channel through which our just grievances would get it to the power structure. I had hoped that each of you would understand. Numerous religious leaders of the South would call upon their worshipers to comply with a desegregation decision because it is the law, but I have longed to hear your white minister say, follow this decree because integration is morally right and the Negro is your brother. In the midst of blatant injustices inflicted upon the Negro, I have watched white churches stand on the sideline and merely mouth pious irrelevancies and sanctimonious trivialities. In the midst of a mighty struggle to rid our nation of racial and economic injustice, I've heard so many ministers say, those are social issues with which the gospel has no real concern. And I have watched so many churches commit themselves to a completely otherworldly religion, which made a strange distinction between body and soul, the sacred and the secular. So here we are moving toward the exit of the 20th century with a religious community largely adjusted to the status quo, standing as a taillight behind other community agencies rather than as a headlight leading men to higher levels of justice. Written in 1963. Let's absorb that for just a second, y'all. 1963. Where the hell are we today? One of the great misunderstandings about allyship that we're talking about this. Well, there's some allies going on, and I love the allies. Renee Good, an ally, a martyr. But the great misunderstandings about allyship in terms of the immigrant struggle for justice is the assumption that solidarity begins in action only. In reality, solidarity begins much earlier and much deeper. And this is where organizing, we're going to talk about this in later editions, but this is where organizing comes in, because for a lot of us who are white or protected with citizenship, the first work of solidarity is actually deeper. As I said, it's conversion, right? That's a difficult prayer for recognition that we've inherited and benefited from these systems of privilege. We've just accepted that shit, all while we unwittingly, unknowingly, unconsciously dispossess other people. So I'm not saying don't go into personal guilt, because this is not about white fragility. It's about telling the truth. It's not about justice. It's about holding people accountable, including ourselves. Now, faith traditions, white faith traditions, including the white Catholic Church, not the brown Catholic Church, not the black Catholic Church, but the white Catholic Church. These faithful traditions teach us that confession is a way to go, to hold that private, personal, individual guilt. And so any challenge white Catholics have is sometimes met with humiliation and guilt and just paralysis. What we need to look at is a faith tradition that teaches us that confession is not about humiliation. It's about liberation, acknowledging where we have stood, how we have got there, and how we continue to stand, and where we need to stand differently. And someone else may need to tell us where to stand. Someone else may need to tell us where to be. So it's about internal reckoning. It's about, looking at these alliances that have held our privilege together and asking the question, are these still valid for us? So we got to root ourselves into actual relationships with people. And that's the inner conversion, because it's not about just jumping into action and standing with people and just sort of like wearing your Che Guevara t-shirt. That's not what this is about. It's about knowing your neighbor who is undocumented, who is an immigrant, who was beat up in the BLM movement, is knowing their story and knowing who they are, taking the time to form a bond, because we are missing that bond. And we can't allow ourselves to disintegrate into chaos and ideology and ideological wars and violence, because nonviolence is born in an inner conversion of fellowship that we have with each other, right? And we call that in Spanish, it's hermanar. It's the becoming a brother, becoming a sister with another person. It is that level of solidarity that we have to reach. Now, what then is the role of the church then? What's the role of the faith community? What's the role of the synagogue? It's to create a space, to create a structure of encuentro, a structure of encounter, where we can be that space where the bridges emerge. Now, we don't build them. They emerge because there is a sacred space that allows us to see each other and find the divinity in each other, to see that we have a common bond because we have a common creator. Now, James Cone, one of the great Black liberation theologians, pushes it even further about what the role of church is, not just to be a container, but he says the church that does not take sides with the oppressed has already taken sides with the oppressor. That's true. That we can't have these spaces that we create for encuentro and emerging bridges just to satisfy the white community that they're doing something. They always have to lead to an action, a commitment to stand not only in heart, but also in body with other people. And that's an inner clarity we have to have, that where conversion does not end with a warm feeling that, oh, wow, I really just saw my neighbor. It now says, yeah, now you're going to go to your neighbor's house and walk with them and see what the hell's going on and see where they're asking you to stand. So this is the holy work that we're doing. Dr. King was very explicit that nonviolent action is not an impulse. It is a deliberate, strategic, and tactical decision that we need to make. And he says this, he says, nonviolent resistance is not a method for cowards. It does resist. If one uses this method because he's afraid or merely because he lacks the instruments of violence, he is not truly nonviolent. Nonviolence requires a willingness to suffer and sacrifice. It is grounded in the conviction that the universe is on the side of justice. This is where we have to be. And the only way to get there on a practical level, my friends, is to connect to another person, to have an encuentro, that your worship space has to be a space of encounter, not a space to escape reality. That homilies and sermons and drashes that lead us into complacency, that lead us into intellectual abstraction, are not enough. They have to lead us to commitment and relationship to each other, and a commitment to work to stand together bodily in the body. So this is kind of where we need to be. And this is where hermanar, or becoming brother and sister to each other, which is like imagining we're brother and sister, we are become that brother and sister. Now, this requires what we call a participatory religious experience, meaning that we are participating in it. We are not consumers of this. Now, I'm going to speak from the Christian tradition, because that's a tradition that I know well. Participatory Christianity, full, active, conscious participation in the life of community. It is not just simply knowing, I know the words of the ritual. I know where this ritual is going to go. I know the words of the Mass. That is not full conscious active participation from which the life of the church flows as Eucharist. That is not it. Just being a better singer at Mass is not the end freaking game. It is that you have gone to your service, and now what are you going to do? Y para qué? And what are you going to do now? That's what this is about. And it's this nonviolent action that is sprung from an encuentro with the divine and with your brother and sister in that space. You found each other. You're now standing and walking together, not just in spirit, but in body, getting out on the streets and walking in prayer, standing together. And when we see a community of faith that is committed to this slow and demanding work of forming relationships, that's what we do. Or do we see a community that just is looking at just being compliant and memorizing the prayers? We have to see a community of faith that is willing to name and reject white Christian nationalism, not just with our words, but with our hands, to dismantle it actually, to dismantle policies, to be on the streets and to be in the board of supervisors, to be at the Capitol, to be wherever we need to be, to dismantle these structures of privilege. So as we ponder these kinds of things about what is demanded of us, the Gospel of John, what we're reading today, is John 1, verse 29 to 34. In that passage, John the Baptist is declaring, pointing it to Jesus. He says, "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world." He is recognizing that this humble person is going to be the one from the margins, the one who has known poverty, the one who has known displacement, the one who has known pain already in his early life. This person like you, one of you, is going to be the Lamb of God. Was going to take away the sin of this empire, the sin of inequality, the sin of oppression, the sin of coercive violence, the sin of urban occupation, the sin of throwing our neighbors into the back of a unmarked vehicle to take them to some holding cell with no food or water, to send them to a concentration camp where there's no doctor, where there's no kind of health, where they languish and die of bed sores, or where they're choked to death as they did just a week ago, or simply shot in the streets. This is where we are. We are not thinking this is not a third world country. This is freaking America. And a word to everybody else. These conditions existed in 1774. They existed in 1771. They existed in 1769. And these are the grievances that were held that led to the independence, that led to the revolution. And then we are not looking for another revolution. We're not looking for another civil war. But we are acknowledging the fact that when the people are not participating in freedom and experiencing liberation, they will always find a way. They will always find a way. So the spirit of the divine is in all of us. And when Jesus had his mikvah, when he went into the water and got out of the water, there was an awareness that was so powerful that other people could see it. That Ruach HaKodesh, the spirit of the divine, was upon him, and that would inspire him in his work of liberation. That as a rabbi, Jesus has entered fully into an alignment with the liberative message of the Torah, which is to open freedom for all people. And it shows that when he moves through the world, he's going to move with compassion and love and healing. And he's going to first of all and most powerfully connect to the marginalized, the victimized, the poor. And this alignment with the Torah is reflected in the community of the people that are drawn around him, and a movement that is animated by relationship and a collective shared value for liberation and a collective renunciation of domination. And it is very sad, and there's a number of historical reasons how this and why this happened and how it's sustained. And I've talked about this in other rants and communiques, and still continue to talk about it. But this is a historical development, a distortion in the trajectory of the spirituality of Jesus. There are a number of reasons for that, right? But this Christianity has been deformed. It has been destroyed a number of times throughout history to be not an instrument of liberation, but as a handmaid of repression. And we know that, and we just have to accept that as part of our history. We are now at that same space where Christian nationalism is taking on the face of another crusade. We have to therefore renounce that full-heartedly within our own communities. This is not necessarily something that we have, it's a battle within ourselves, the battle for the soul of the church. And we do that by perhaps speaking less, but acting more kindly, showing more mercy, and spending more time in stillness and contemplation, spending more time in forming relationships with those who are marginalized around us, and together standing as one against this distortion of Christianity that we find happening throughout our own community. So that's it, folks. I want to acknowledge all the folks that are here. We got some really great comments. We have Ana Maria has a couple comments, and Rosie is welcoming here. Ana Maria is very aware of her privilege, and I must be a voice for the press. I cannot sit back in comfort. And I agree, Ana Maria. That is exactly it. And Bob feels the same way. I know that Poncho, Elaine, y'all are in agreement on that. I always say that the one caveat I say that when we do allied development is that our umbrage and our anger and our righteous anger, right? Our very justified anger, as allies, if we have privilege, cannot eclipse the lived experience and the wisdom and the direction of those who are directly affected. Keeping in mind that there are people that are targeted, that are named as scapegoats, and those folks are the ones that we need to they're leading that way, and the structures that hold them as scapegoats is not changing. And that's why we have to look at why we go to the next step of organizing. We look at those economic and policy structures, the immigration system that maintains a kind of enslavement, a type of enslavement that is social, economic, and political. It is a movement of holding people enslaved. The same way of incarceration for Black folks. It is a system that is meant to sustain the subjugation and stripping the political power and voice of the Black community. We want to look at all of these kinds of systems, and the way to get at that is, yes, we call attention to it in marches, which need to happen. But there's a deeper path that we need to also embark on, a path of deep transformation. And that's what we're going to be getting into the subsequent times, and we're going to be looking at some of these issues around how we move forward and how we organize for power and organize for change. So I want to thank those of you who are watching. We got a few other folks. I want to acknowledge that Teresa Hernandez from Fremont is here. Lucy is here from San Ho. Bob is up from wherever up north, and then we got Rosie is from San Ho. I think you're in San Ho, unless you're down south. I want to welcome all of you guys, and thank you all for watching. Again, this is on. If you subscribe to my, I guess John Pettigrew, look it up. It's on the YouTube. Just opening up that channel just now. Facebook and my very personal Facebook and Father John Homilies. It's also there too. I may be adding other platforms. I've just got comments that people would like to see this more widely and more accessible for other people to watch it. So if you like it, share it. If not, just enjoy it. Enjoy your time today and have an amazing Dr. King Day tomorrow. Tomorrow is not just a day for just kind of lazying around. It is for a day for reading and activity and doing something. Be informed and be part of and commit yourself to the movement to liberation. That's what this is about. Dr. King would not want a holiday that just allows us to be, have just fun. Fun is of course, in the liberation movement, but we must commit ourselves to work. So thank you all very much, and have a great Dr. King Day. Remembering the struggle for justice begins with the struggle within yourself. To find yourself in the struggle is to find yourself as love, healing, and forgiveness, and to be that for others and to act that way is there. Thank you all very much. I will see you all soon. Thank you all. Bye now.